Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Now, before we get started, I think it needs to be said that this morning's briefing concerns one of the 4 topics that black folks don't handle very well. You should know what the 4 topics are by now. Anything pertaining to sports, music, preachers, or politics. And I should also say that we're going to be discussing some of the attitude that certain of the black immigrants have when they come to the United States. Now, I know that there's a large number of black immigrants who happen to be in these circles who are not with the BS and who actually are on code, so this doesn't pertain to you, but the problem is it pertains to enough. Now, recently I posted on my Twitter feed that it was Rihanna who decided that she was going to make the front page of her Twitter feed have Dr. King with some photoshopped gold teeth in his mouth, because apparently to her that's just so hilarious. She thinks that that's just cute. Well, it ain't cute. Though you did have some fools who were trying to figure out how to make excuses for her and say, when you think about it, Dr. King was gangster when you think. No, he wasn't. Knock it off, goofball. The only thing more pathetic than all the foreign flags who were calling themselves defending this garbage were the folks who really should have known better, who were otherwise trying to make excuses for it or rationalize it away. Respect is one of those things that must be insisted upon. Because there's always some dirtbag who looks at you and thinks that you're somehow exempt from being respected. Everybody else should get respect, especially themselves, but not you. Apparently, you're some sort of special case where respect doesn't apply to you. And we have to make it crystal clear, respect starts with us. She swam over here after she fled from whatever island she came from, and now she's in the United States with the kinsmen of Dr. King. The people who knew him best, the people, if not the family members at least, of the people who marched with Dr. King and understood what he stood for because he came from the same background as us. And here she is deciding this is something cute to do. Because I'm pretty sure that Rihanna would never make it a point to call herself doing some garbage like this about any of the Barbadian notable figures. And no shade, but I'm afraid I can't say icons when it comes to Barbadian notable figures, mainly because in order to be iconic, you got to be known outside of just your local community. Those of us who came out of slavery in the United States, we create icons. That's our stock and trade. We make icons. They're not just known around the local watering hole in Kentucky. Or there's the Chitlin Circuit down in Alabama. No, when we make icons, everybody on the planet knows who they are. They become touchstones, they become the watchwords, and they become household words in cultures that never even met us. You go to Derry, Ireland right now, and you will find a mural that shows John Hume, who was a noted Northern Ireland statesman. He had something to do with the cessation of hostilities there. And you'll also see right up there with him Dr. King. And when you ask the people, why the world you got Dr. King up there, they say, well, John Hume did for us what Dr. King did in the United States. We hold him as basically being as significant in Ireland as Dr. King proved himself to be in the United States and around the world. They didn't say that John Hume was Ireland's version of Bob Marley. I can't think of anybody from Barbados or Trinidad and Tobago. Nobody will compare any of their people to Nicki Minaj or to Rihanna. That's for dang sure. But everybody wants to compare him to ours. Oh, he's France's version of Michael Jackson. He's Britain's version of Muhammad Ali. This guy over here is Japan's version of Michael Jordan. This guy over here, he's Mexico's version of Tupac Shakur. And it's not because we're in the United States either, by the way. There's a number of other ethnic groups in this country, and yet, if I were to ask you to name for me some iconic person from the Latino community who all the world looks at and says, we hold this guy as being a singular icon, you wouldn't be able to name it. You want to know why? It's because they define themselves as white. And when you define yourself as white, well, you've basically erased yourself. And the same thing happens to go in the Asian American community. I ask you to name any of them, you'll say Bruce Lee. Only one small problem with that. Bruce Lee wasn't able to get any kind of traction in the United States. He was a sidekick on a comedy. He had to go to China in order to get himself some sort of props. But I digress. This kinky need that these black immigrants have in too many cases to call themselves either throwing shade at us or otherwise lampooning and ridiculing our icons and our historical figures This need on their part, it speaks to a fundamental moral deficiency. Because, of course, Rihanna's not the only one. Nicki Minaj called herself lampooning our shining prince, Malcolm, on the cover of one of her trash music albums, whatever that cat screeching, yak torturing crap is that she calls music. See, the problem with garbage people is that they're incapable of elevating anything. They drag everyone and everything down to their bestial, perverted, demented level. Now, what Nicki Minaj did, ridiculing Malcolm, that was back in 2014, and there was a big backlash over that. But what the heifer did wasn't an accident. And just to prove it, 6 years later in 2020, Minaj decided to single out another of our icons to be ridiculed, this time Rosa Parks. And again, you had fools pathetically trying to invent a rationale to justify that too and say it wasn't so bad and it was actually a compliment to Rosa Parks. I mean, just the nerve. This is what happens when you try to take up for immoral people. They're liars, and the only way that you can defend them is to become a liar yourself. So what Nicki Minaj did, that wasn't some one-off. Malcolm, Rosa, before it's all over, if she hasn't already gotten around to trying to disrespect Dr. King, you just give her some time. Rihanna and Nicki Minaj are pure trash. What few brain cells they might have had are swimming in a toxic brew of hair straightening and skin bleaching chemicals. In the islands that they come from, they have a Eurocentric culture that is out of control. They think it's cute to hate on blackness. And since nobody waves the flag for blackness higher or better than we do here in the US, of course these two pieces of garbage would hate on us the most. They hate us because they see everything that they're too weak to be. They see a people who in the face of oppression didn't run, we stood. They see people who, when they're faced with a culture that tries to demonize being black, we are unapologetically black. We don't apologize for it. We don't try to make people comfortable with it. We're black whether you like it or not. In fact, we hope you don't like it. We like making you uncomfortable. Now, I notice a bunch of dusty dudes and hood rats who were sticking up for Rihanna, claiming it wasn't so bad. You know, some of y'all are color struck, I think. Some of you have a gutter mentality where you think that chasing exotic skirts makes you something other than a dusty dude, when the truth of the matter is that's the very definition of a dusty dude. We got a bunch of dusty dude simps running around here. As far as they're concerned, they think to themselves that it makes them a higher class of dusty dude. Ooh, I just love me some chicks from the island, man. So you got the hood rats who see Rihanna with all of her black self-hatred, and they envy that because they don't like being black themselves. And you got the dusty dudes who have the freaking mentality of a refrigerator magnet. And neither one of them are going to do us a dang bit of good. No matter what your excuse is, it ain't gonna wash. Not here, it won't. I said it years ago, and it's still true today. Those who do not defend their advocates will have no advocates. If you cultivate a culture of allowing people to trash those who stood up for you, what you're saying to the world is, I'm not worthy of respect. I can't even respect those who stand up for me. Well, hell, if you can't respect people who stand up for you, chances are you don't respect yourself very much now, do you? No, we cannot make excuses for disrespect. We've been so used to people showing us no regard that for a lot of us, we're just accustomed to it. We just accept it. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you have to have a stroke over every little slight from every little pinhead who thinks that they want to say something slick. But when this stuff happens, you're not supposed to be looking for ways to rationalize it away or try to say it's okay. First, you start off running away from having to stand up for your icons. Next thing you know, you wind up like Rihanna and Nicki Minaj running away from your home island. This attitude on the part of people who fled their home countries speaks to a fundamental inferiority complex. They know they ran, and they ran here to where we're at. And for a lot of them, that makes them feel some kind of way. Because they know that in so many other places around the world, when people face adversity and oppression, they fought, they stood. It didn't lead to a mass exodus. But people like Rihanna and Nicki Minaj ran. So to compensate for their feelings of cowardice and failure, they attack us, the very people that they run to. And this makes them feel better somehow. These two are the last ones to be taking shots at our icons. Have you seen where Nicki Minaj is from, by the way? She's from a town in Trinidad and Tobago called St. James. Well, while Nicki Minaj thinks that it's cute to ridicule black female icons like Rosa Parks, just out of curiosity, what's the standing of women in Trinidad and Tobago?
A new movement has sprung up on the island nation of Trinidad and Tobago, demanding an end to what's being called a plague of violence against women.
We demand to be safe. Whose streets?
Our streets!
Women are marching to reclaim Trinidad's streets from sexual predators, kidnappers and murderers.
We want the world free, not rape.
We want the world free, not rape.
After this demonstration, I got a message about yet another femicide. A 7-year-old boy cried for help as his mother was attacked by his machete-wielding father. They found 36-year-old Adana Elaine hacked to death. Her husband hanged himself. 2020 was a brutal year in this nation of 1.4 million. 47 women and girls were murdered. In contrast, 49 women were murdered in Philadelphia last year. Philly has a similar population to Trinidad and had 500 murders, its worst record for 60 years. Trinidad had 100 fewer homicides, but the percentage of women killed in Trinidad was slightly higher, although the real death toll may be even worse. More than 400 women were reported missing. Some were found, but it's feared that others were trafficked into prostitution or killed and their bodies hidden.
Say, has anyone heard of Nicki Minaj doing any songs about this? Has she done any Twitter tweets about this, calling this out? If anything, this is what she should have on the cover of one of her albums. Black women in the United States have the right to ride the bus. See, Rosa Parks went ahead and she got a W on that one. Meanwhile, back in Trinidad and Tobago, it seems that the black women there don't even have the right to live. But I guess that Nicki Minaj was so busy trying to distract herself by attacking our icons, she just didn't have time to notice. And here's another minor incident that apparently slipped her notice. Now, as I explained earlier, Nicki Minaj is from a place called St. James. About 35 miles east of that, there happens to be a town called Arouca. I know the pronunciation's off, but roll with it. Well, it looks like they had an unpleasant incident there where, at a church of all places, they had to call in a freaking SWAT team. And the reason that they had to call in a SWAT team is because you had 69 people who were being held as slaves there. These people were being held in cages. I'm not making that up. You had about 69 people being held in cages by this church. And after they were freed, apparently the authorities recovered taser guns and batons that were apparently being used on these people. It's been reported that these prisoners were being underfed, beaten, and caged. This is human trafficking going on in Nicki Minaj's home country, and apparently she doesn't seem to have much to say about it. Wonder if this is going to find its way into any of the verses of her next song. Somehow, I doubt that. Dr. King was a man of the cloth, you know, but I don't recall where he was moonlighting as a prison warden, and I don't recall Rosa Parks getting hacked to death either. Perhaps this is why we got so many of those immigrants who prefer to try to focus on lampooning and ridiculing us. See, they understand they haven't been fighting white supremacy. They surrendered to it a long time ago. They know it, and the white supremacists know it. White supremacy broke them. That's what it did. It broke them in half. Broke their spirit, broke their wills. It broke them a long time ago. That's why they ran here. White supremacy broke them, and the worst part is they were and still are the majority in the places they come from, but you wouldn't know it by looking. They've been turned into nothing more than squatters in their own land. So when you see these immigrants attacking us, understand what you're seeing. Broken, defeated bootlicks who are trying to show their masters that they're loyal lapdogs to them now. They identify with white supremacy, so when they see us, they see black people who didn't break, who weren't defeated. They see what we've done, even though we're vastly outnumbered. We, in this place, have managed to have an outsized effect on this country and the world. An effect that these immigrants have failed to have in their own lands for themselves, where they're the majority. That's the reason why whenever one of them accomplishes something, they immediately make sure to point out, oh, I'm from this and so island, I'm from this and such country. Down in Florida, you had a political race that was won by a Haitian immigrant, and she makes sure everybody knows, Haitian, thank you very much. She wants to make sure people call her, oh, I'm the first Haitian to be elected to Congress from Florida. I'm the first Somalian. I'm the first Nigerian, this, that, and the third. They'll do that all the time. But as soon as one of them commits a crime involved in a scam or whatever, well, they're black, black, it's black. Don't go singling us out, it's black. Yeah, they want to be amalgamated whenever it's something that they're not so proud of, but the rest of the time, don't put me in with those guys over there. I'm not like these black Americans over here. I'm different. We're different over here. We got our own island over here. And you can play that self-deluding game if you want, where you point to, say, like Marcus Garvey. But Marcus Garvey was rejected by the Jamaican people. They rejected him. Marcus Garvey got no traction, no support, no notoriety until he met us. Until he linked up with the real riders in the United States. That's when things finally started to move. And we know this was the case because after the FBI had him deported on trumped-up charges, he tried to go back and get something started in Jamaica, but the people of Jamaica looked and said, man, we ain't with that, man. You got yourself bounced from the U.S., now you're back here with us. So we ain't doing all that. The same refusal to get active that Garvey had encountered before he left Jamaica was the same thing he went back to. That revolutionary spirit ain't down there. Oh, you'll find a few folks, a couple of hoots and hollers, but a couple of hoots and hollers ain't good enough. The occasional person over here, the occasional person over there, that ain't good enough. At some point, you're going to have to achieve a critical mass, and it ain't there. It just isn't. These immigrants who come here, they would never have the kind of opportunities that we have made for them in their home countries, and we know that they wouldn't because they left. We can see what's going on there. We were the ones who created spaces for them to have the opportunities that they have. They could never have achieved it there, otherwise they would not have left. Few Africans and practically no islanders earned any sort of notoriety until we took up their cause. Simply put, there is no substitute for the moral legitimacy or the strength of passion that we bring to the fight. You're not going to find it in the islands. You're not even going to find it in Africa. That's just a fact. The purest and strongest example of blackness is right here. That's why you got all these Negroes, they want to come here. Doors don't get opened unless we open them. The Rihannas and the Nicki Minajs, they're simultaneously glad that they can try to pretend to be one of us and benefit from the space that we've created for black people, but at the same time, they resent us because they're envious as hell. We're not trying to get closer to Eurocentricity like they are. We don't want to be Europeans. They do. They also hate us because our success at making a name for ourselves under the most repressive and racist regime on the planet reminds them of exactly how much they failed. That they had to come here to us because we made it safe for them to do so. You certainly ain't got the kind of off-kilter crap that what's going on in Trinidad and Tobago. You ain't seeing that going on here. Rihanna and Nicki Minaj, they come here and try to do their corny, awkward imitations of us, trying to imitate our verbiage, our style of dress, our swagger. They're as corny as Vanilla Ice with that mess. They're as corny as the most cornball, suburbanite, just idiotic wannabe that you could imagine. That's how they look. Our words come out of their mouths sounding like mush. Their tongues simply cannot wrap around the way that we use the words, and it shows. It's excruciatingly obvious. That's why so many of the time you see Rihanna and Nicki Minaj running around dressed like strippers and prostitutes. In other words, something where there's no expectation that they've got to get it right. A stripper wears very little clothing, so there's very little to critique about how she dresses. That's how low the bar has to be in order for the Nicki Minajs and the Rihannas to get over it. Well, given how they behave and who it is they're trying to appeal to, cosplaying as hookers makes total sense. They're prostituting themselves to the white media. You will never see them making it a point to disrespect white historical figures and icons. They know better than that. They know what side their bread's buttered on. This is not meant to dog out the on-code brothers and sisters from the islands or from Africa. And if I see anyone trying to make it into that in the comment section, don't be surprised when your comment disappears or when you get blocked altogether. I have seen the occasional comments and replies from these individuals. The ones who understand exactly what the problems are, where they came from, and understand that this stuff needs to be dealt with. I know that there's a lot of black immigrants who understand what the deal is, and they're as fed up with the situation and as disgusted by it as anyone. I am not saying that all black immigrants to a man are on the bull crap, but we got to call it out, and we have to be honest about the nature of the problem and the magnitude of the problem. We have to be clear about this dirtbag behavior and that it is not okay. Because you never see us making it a point to disrespect immigrant black people at all. You have no examples of us trying to drag Mandela's name through the mud. You have no instances of us taking any sort of these icons from the islands or from Africa and deciding that we're going to be trying to super glue some sort of hood ghetto nonsense onto them. We don't do that. Tell me, where is the DAS/FBA version of Candace Owens? Where's the black person from the U.S. who makes it a point to call African and Caribbean countries S-hole nations? Or to help push white supremacist dogma that's meant to dehumanize black people in the diaspora? Go ahead and show them to me. Who do you see out here trying to make their daily bread doing that? You see, there's a cottage industry for doing that mess against us here in the United States because this is the central hub of white supremacy. But that alone is not enough. They do it because they know that an example of a people resisting oppression in one place would set a bad example for everybody else who's oppressed. And nobody fights harder or has done it better than we have under these adverse circumstances. So as far as the white supremacists are concerned, if they're not able to raise up a bumper crop of bootlicks from among the native population here, well, then they'll go ahead and import some in. The kind of stuff that you see Rihanna and Nicki Minaj doing, this is the kind of dirtbag behavior that was going on where they were from. That's the kind of stuff that they were doing when they were bootlicking for the white supremacists in the islands or the countries that they came from. They look in the mirror and they see a phony knockoff of a European. All the hair straightening chemicals and skin lighteners and nose jobs on earth doesn't change what they are. They want to be Europeans, but even they know that's not going to happen. The Rihannas and Nicki Minajs have this perverted love-hate relationship with us. They love the opportunities that we've made for them, but they hate the fact that we were the ones who did it, because it reminds them of their own failure. And it also reminds them that, well, the only space that's been opened up for you is as a black person. And if you've made up your mind that you're trying to migrate away from blackness, well, you've pretty much been forced to dig in your heels on this one. There's only so far you can go. Your little journey to being blonde-haired and blue-eyed is pretty much going to stop with hair extensions and contact lenses. But this off-kilter garbage, this mess here is not going to go without an answer. When we see this mess, we are going to push back and push back aggressively. And if you are one of those black immigrants who sees this stuff, you need to be calling this out. Because you know as well as everyone else does that the entire reason why these places, these islands, and these countries are the fix that they're in happens to be because the loyalty system of black people broke down a hell of a long time ago in those places. And it's the kind of dirtbag behavior that Rihanna and Nicki Minaj are indulging in that's the reason why. It's like this because people tolerate it that way. They tolerate the garbage people who do this mess and make excuses for them and try to rationalize it away. What they're really rationalizing away is doing anything about it. That's moral cowardice. And moral cowardice is off code as hell. Now, to be clear, I am not attempting to exalt those of us who came out of slavery in the U.S. above the rest of the family worldwide. I'm not trying to exalt us over anyone. But what I am doing is making it very clear. We are a distinct people due to what we have contributed to the history of the world here in this place. And there is no shame in acknowledging that. That would be like saying that there's shame in acknowledging what Marcus Garvey did, or the contributions of Dr. Joseph Benyakinen. Because the exact same people who would be pretending as if it's too much for them to show respect for us here in the United States and what we've contributed and achieved and made, what we've made possible, these are the same people who, if you were talking about Islam, they would have no problem putting the Arabs on a pedestal. And don't get me started about Europe, or even Asia for that matter, or even Latin America for that matter. There's a whole lot of black folks running around who have no problem putting anything that's not black on a pedestal and saying, oh, we have so much to learn. They have no problem exalting all these other groups. But as soon as you start talking and pointing to other black people, all of a sudden, well, they ain't as great as all that, you know. Yeah, all of a sudden, here comes the undermining. And that's the reason why you've seen that as far as this whole Pan-African thing is gone, that's why people are looking going, you know what? If we're not dumping it all together, at the very least, we're going to put it on ice. We're putting that thing in the basement. Maybe we can come back to it some other time, but we ain't thinking about that. Because that happens to be unrealistic. Ask Dr. King what he thought about his I Have a Dream speech 4 years later. And you see where I'm coming from. Oh yeah, a whole lot of those ideologies and schools of thought that found fertile ground in the 20th century, They wound up being artifacts of the 20th century now, didn't they? So if you're part of the black immigrant groups, if you're part of that branch of the family and you see this mess going on, you need to be calling it out. When people are calling themselves attacking those of us here in the U.S., they're actually attacking unapologetic blackness. That's what they're attacking, because that's the audience who they're doing it for. And there's no shame, by the way, in pointing to what it is that we've accomplished. There's no shame in pointing out black exceptionalism, even if it doesn't necessarily come from the people who are the 5 or 6 people on your street. Game is supposed to recognize game. That's how it works. But guess what? Game is also supposed to recognize phony too, and call it out. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Anthony Cooper, Cloud Walker Z, Lamont Davis, Vashawn Hurst, and Gwendolyn Langston. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.